Texas is going to take over the AP polls.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm Clea Butler. Joined alongside me is Sophia Jones. Happy Tuesday, everyone. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. All right, so the laundry list of things we have to cover today. We're going to go over the top 10 sports cities, and just to fill you in a little bit, Sophia and I are living in two of them. NCAA NET Rankings, which is an interesting comparison to the AP polls for this week. Some new faces that have reached the top of the polls. One of those being the Texas Longhorns, who Sophia and I have said we have been very impressed in seeing. UConn has stayed consistent at that number one spot. Texas moving up 2 spots after defeating the number 3 and number 4 in front of them. They're sitting in second place. South Carolina has moved down to 3rd. UCLA has moved down to 4th. LSU in that top 5. And then I'm going to mention Michigan at that 6th, so on and so forth. Those have kind of been the top teams that we have really been covering in terms of they've been putting on quite a show. But Sophia, out of these top 5 to 6 teams, what have you seen from them so far?
Well, you mentioned and started off with Texas, and I think it was going to be pretty obvious that after the wins against South Carolina and UCLA, they would then jump those 2 teams in the rankings into that number 2 spot. They're definitely on UConn's heels. One of the big questions in women's college basketball for a while has been that UConn really does seem like that strong front runner, but who's going to really cement themselves in that number 2 spot? Because I think 2 through 6 is pretty competitive and tight. So Texas right now creating a little bit of separation from those teams, especially when you consider that they beat South Carolina and UCLA without 3 rotation players, one of them being a starter in Aaliyah Crump. So they looked good, and this is only going to be an indication that they're going to continue to look even better.
I absolutely agree with you, and not trying to hop on a Texas bandwagon by any means, but I just really think they have a very firm foundation right now. I think their tournament, the Thanksgiving tournament they had, being able to go back-to-back in beating South Carolina and UCLA, that is a very impressive feat in itself. 2 teams that have boasted, some of the top overall players that are going to be in this year's WNBA draft. I felt like Texas was a little bit of an underrated top opponent, and now they're making a name for themselves. So really excited to see what that could look like moving on, especially in the conference play, which some teams have already entered, some teams are about to join, but really at the heels of UConn right now could possibly give them a run for their money at the number 1 spot. But UConn also remains undefeated and get a majority of those first place votes, and likely will for a good amount of time. South Carolina and UCLA slipped slightly after both losing to Texas. We've seen some interesting aspects of both South Carolina's and UCLA's game. UCLA, I think Lauren Betts has really been obviously at the helm, talk of conversation. But she has not necessarily performed in these past couple of games the way maybe some have anticipated her to, or even the way that she started out the season. That could just be a slump that she's going through. But I believe that's a significant part in UCLA. I don't want to say having a downfall by any means, because they're still a top-ranked team, especially with the guard play that they've been having. But we're used to seeing the offense go through Lauren Betts, and she hasn't been at the same caliber. She might be dealing with some injury as well. But even for South Carolina, I think the biggest thing that we noticed in that Texas game is that they kind of let the game slip away from them in terms of Texas just looked like they wanted it a little bit more than South Carolina did. South Carolina just didn't look like the South Carolina that we have seen in terms of that team clicking on all cylinders. They're also a team that runs through their forwards a lot and their front court, but which is still reign true, but it kind of goes back to, I think this team and brand new faces are still learning how to mesh with each other.
I agree. And for South Carolina, I definitely think that they still will figure it out. It's just gonna back to a matter of the fundamentals and like being that balanced team that we're used to seeing. But we are, as women's basketball fans, extremely lucky because Texas and South Carolina are in the same conference. So we will be able to see these teams at least play 2 more times. We don't know what their tournament is going to look like. Maybe they'll face each other again. That's the trajectory that they're on. But when you talk about a UCLA team as well, Lauren Betts, during that Texas loss, she had to come out of the game briefly because of a shoulder injury. And then she came back in, but didn't play that next matchup against Duke. So maybe she is still battling with a little bit of aches and pains. But UCLA then went to beat Tennessee, which is another team that we saw a big shift from. They went down 5 spots and are currently sitting in that number 19 spot. Tennessee has been a pretty interesting team so far this season because they've lost to some of these ranked opponents, and then their wins aren't just, or especially against some of these mid-majors early in the season, haven't been super convincing. They were another team that they have to adjust to a little bit of shifts with a player exit right at the beginning of the season. I think just based off of the last game with Janiyah Barker, she is starting to find her form more. But if she can develop that consistency, that will be huge for Tennessee as well.
I totally agree with you. Other than that, a lot of teams have stayed pretty consistent in where they're being ranked. I think one of the most unfortunate fall offs, I would say, is of NC State. They have dropped from the top 25 rankings. They are also receiving votes still, but they had a pretty significant win at the beginning of the season. Who they beat is blanking my brain as of right
Tennessee.
now. Tennessee, which was a significant win for them. But they went on to lose a handful of games and also broke their winning streak, or lost their winning streak that they had at home. And I feel like any team that loses a very 20 plus significant streak that you had in your own territory, that has to break your mojo a little bit. And I feel like they just haven't found their groove to get back on a consistent track.
I agree. And after that initial win against Tennessee, it felt like this team was really coming along. I love their backcourt duo with Zam Jones and Zoe Brooks, but again, just can't rely solely on that backcourt. But I think they still have a little bit of room to make their way back up and into the rankings, because when you look at that win against Tennessee, they still have the game plan to success. It's just about execution. Another team that I think that saw a little bit of movement and will continue to see more movement has been West Virginia. They are down 4. And then after the AP poll was released, they lost to Villanova today, 81-59. So I think they have a potential to drop, and who knows, maybe NC State will make their way back in.
Yeah, some upcoming games in terms of maybe we'll see some more movement, some more motion in the ocean. Tennessee is going up against Stanford, Louisville, South Carolina, Notre Dame, Ole Miss, North Carolina, Texas, Oklahoma, NC State, LSU, and Duke. So exciting games that are on the horizon that could possibly create some more movement within these AP polls. But coming up next, we are going to get into the net rankings, because those tell a little bit of a different story. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the momentum. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heat up, and you can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Okay, so the NCAA net rankings right now. This is based heavily on numbers. AP poll is voted on by media, different members. There's a lot that goes into the AP polls, but it's a little more subjective to an extent. Where this is basically strictly on numbers. So this goes based on a team's winning percentage, average opponent's winning percentage, as well as average opponent's winning percentage, and so on and so forth. So as of right now, it has LSU for the net rankings as number one. Let's remember that LSU is now on a 4-game winning streak, but they have scored over 100 points in every single one of those games. The competition that they have had recently has looked a little bit different in comparison to some of these top teams that we have seen alongside of them, like a UConn, who is technically second in the net rankings right now. Then it goes Texas, UCLA, Michigan, and South Carolina. Within the top 6, Michigan State, TCU, Kentucky, Maryland would all fill out the top 10. Sophia, what were maybe the biggest surprises to you and the biggest comparisons to the AP poll when we're looking at how the net ranking works?
I would definitely say LSU, and the way that the NCAA calculates some of this stuff, like you said, it's strictly analytics, so all numbers, but essentially there are different quads that that a team is considered in. You have quad 1, which is the best, 2, 3, and 4, which quad 4 would be considered the least competitive. And so for LSU's 8-0 record, they have they're 7-0 in quad 4 wins and 1-0 in quad 3 wins. So that's kind of is a direct indication of strength of schedule. But again, because they're just blowing out these teams, that is why they are rated so highly. But another team that I found interesting to really make a significant jump would be Nebraska. Overall, the Big Ten is heavily represented in these net rankings. They're actually the conference has most represented with 9 teams. At SEC is right below them with 8, but Nebraska is sitting at number 15. And in comparison to the AP poll, they're not even in it. They're in the others receiving votes category. So them and Oregon, who is number 16 in these net rankings, is another squad that I found very interesting to be there. And again, some more Big Ten love with Minnesota at number 17, who's also a team that didn't make an appearance in the AP polls. I'm very interested to see Stanford because right now they are number 23 in the net rankings. They are not in the AP poll, but they're in that others receiving votes category with only 2 votes, so a little bit on the lower end, but they're in that spot, the number 23 spot in the net ranking, because they have some really quality wins against some good opponents. Another thing that the net rankings consider is if it's a neutral site game, a home or away, that's another factor as well. But for Stanford, I mean, the ACC is looking pretty open. We've said that before. Duke was that preseason favorite, and they've dropped significantly since the start of the season. and they have some really talented freshmen. They play a really solid pace of basketball. So I think that Stanford is starting to really figure themselves out in this post Tara Vanderveer era. And I would be very interested to see if they can continue to climb. They have that big matchup. That's the ACC SEC challenge against Tennessee coming up. So that should be a really, really interesting game. We love when these high level teams play each other so that we can actually see a little bit more motion in some of these rankings. But some more teams that were towards the bottom of these net rankings as well were USC at 32 and Notre Dame at 33, which found that very interesting. And I think that's essentially an indication that the media and these people that are receiving the AP votes are putting them into higher consideration than maybe strictly the numbers are suggesting.
Which I think it's really good to compare these two because, as we said, it's kind of subjective versus analytical. But I think when you're looking at these net rankings, it also helps you consider some teams, as you mentioned, that aren't in the AP polls, but are doing statistically pretty well. And when you talk about the quad wins as well, you already mentioned LSU has 7 quad 4 wins, 0 quad 1 wins. So again, that's just basically let's just say level of difficulty in the teams that you are playing. UConn is 3-0 in quad 1 wins, 2-0 in quad 4, 2-0 in quad 3, and Texas is 2-0 in quad 1. Both of those being UCLA and South Carolina. So I think, again, not hopping on a Texas bandwagon by any means, but I think it's important to note that they're 4-0 in quad 4, which is, some of that early season play, which is important to, get you into the swing of things. It's really impressive, though, to go from that jump to then going to play back-to-back quad 1 teams and being able to beat both of them. I say that because I think I'm interested to see this same jump for LSU. We've seen LSU go up against like mid-major teams, which is fine. It's preseason. This is what you want to do. We understand, but they have yet to play any quad 1 teams. Obviously, they are in the SEC, where every day is going to be an absolute battle once you get to conference play. So wanting to see that competition where they are ranked number 1 within the net rankings right now, obviously within the top 6 with AP polls. And that's part of why I believe they're ranked a little bit lower, if you will, in quotation marks, in the AP polls, because we haven't seen that same level of competition. But Michigan, a team that we want to highlight too, because I was very impressed in their game against UConn, especially Silas Swords. I think they're going to make a lot of movement within the Big Ten, and UCLA is looking to come back, is looking to win a Big Ten championship. I think Michigan can give them a real run for their money. The Big Ten is looking very strong once again. We looked at Big Ten, we looked to SEC, but there are a significant number of Big Ten teams that have really jumped in the rankings. The only Big East school you're really going to see is UConn. But other than that, it's looking pretty wide open compared to, some of the UConn's. Let's just say UConn is always going to be number 1 for right now. But the rest of the list, both net rankings and AP wise, are looking pretty open, where it could kind of be anyone's game. And that's what we're so excited for these upcoming schedules, because now it's going to be the real moment of truth.
Definitely. And all this will really start to even out more as the season progresses. We'll definitely see. But it's always, with this being the first net rankings of the season, is always interesting to compare and contrast, especially when there are some pretty big differences between the two.
Absolutely. Coming up after this, we're going to talk about the best cities for women's sports in the U.S.
This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. The holiday season is one of the best times for sports. Bowl games, big basketball matchups, playoff pushes, it's all happening at once. And while we're all making choices every day, one of the most fun places to make the right call is PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest way to get in on the daily fantasy. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, lock in your lineup, and you're in the game. It's simple, fast, and available in 45 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. PrizePicks has added an extra layer of excitement to the holiday sports schedule, as well as creating a lineup takes less than a minute, and the app makes the whole process smooth and intuitive. You can choose from a huge range of unique stats, fantasy score, field goal attempted, free throws made, turnovers, whatever fits your strategy. Download PrizePicks apps today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play the first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right.
Some quick breaking news when it comes to the CBA. So the WNBA has proposed a 7-figure base salary, which we have talked about as part of the new CBA. However, it's been released now that they removed team housing from that. And the league has also proposed to make the season longer with an earlier start date that would interfere with the NCAA tournament and potentially other leagues like Project B. So it seems like we may have created a little bit more of a dilemma, because when we're thinking of the next wave of WNBA players, a majority of them are going to be playing in the NCAA tournament. There's March Madness for a reason. If the WNBA gets pushed forward, essentially, within the months of March and April, instead of having their like spring training and everything and preseason kind of starting in April, which gives time for the WNBA draft for players to finish out their season. We've also talked about Project B, which has going to be running through that time too, and would give players a brief break before WNBA season started. This could not be too good.
Yeah. I would say that, and if the WNBA still wants to be regarded as the premier women's basketball league and have that prioritization, they're going to need to make sure that this CBA is exactly what the players want, because I think when you're looking at that extended schedule, it's easy to see a player maybe opting for a league like Project B so that they can have a little bit more of an off season and still get paid more, have equity in the league as well. And cutting team housing, I think, is a really big portion, because now you're starting to talk about money that's not directly going to these players' pockets, because now they're playing, or they're having to pay their own rent, which for a team like the Golden State Valkyries, where rent in the Bay Area is a little steep compared to maybe a smaller city like Indianapolis, there are a lot of factors there. So that is an interesting one.
Yes, definitely is. I think, that part for sure, especially when you have, like you mentioned, there's certain cities that obviously cost more than others. When you're raising the base salary in general and the league minimum is going to be ideally around 500,000, that makes sense where you can afford an apartment during that time, ideally. I think the biggest potential concern of this is not only the conflict between seasons of NCAA season, which would give players no break before they start the WNBA, essentially, or give teams players time to adapt to these new teams. It's kind of just starting right back into gameplay once they're drafted. But we've seen the extension of the WNBA season this year. And there was some mixed feedback when it came to it. Some people liked the amount of games that they had this season. Some didn't. I know from my personal experience speaking to players, it was a significant strain on them because there was times where these teams were playing up to 5 games in a week, 3 back-to-backs, playing in different cities within that time span too, because the WNBA season isn't incredibly long either. So you kind of have to play those games pretty tight to not interfere with anything else. But that fatigue definitely started to weigh in on these players a little bit. And there was multiple players that made it pretty clear that it did, and they didn't love how it was scheduled. Some other feedback that I saw was some fans did not like seeing the same teams essentially continue to play each other like 5 times. That is the problem when you don't have a bunch of teams in the league just yet. Obviously, there are now 2 expansion teams that will be joining and a couple that are still to join in the near future. So that might look a little bit different, but we also have to consider, since it is a smaller league, that you are kind of having to bounce all over the country, let's say. And charters and everything is now part of those terms as well, which will be very significant when it comes to that. So nobody is just on a flight next to me and I'm like, who are you? And they're like, oh, we're the Golden State Valkyries. That shouldn't happen. But yeah, I'm very curious to see the players' reaction. I feel like the league has come out very heavy with offering new things within just the past couple of days of adding this extension. I would love to hear what the players' response is to this.
Definitely, because having more teams, the logical continuation for that is to start to add more games. We saw that in this last season where with the Golden State Valkyries, they added 4 more games to the schedule. So it was a 44-game season. And now with 2 more teams, we don't know how many games will be in this next upcoming season. But if it's going to be an increase, and quite frankly, I think even if it's the same, I am okay with an extended season that just has a little bit more rest in between each matchups. I think that is something that these players definitely deserve. Like you mentioned, there were a couple of stretches for the Valkyries this season I specifically remember where they had 6 games in 12 days or 5 games in 10 days where you're going cross country. It's a lot on these women's bodies. So it will be interesting to see what happens because, like I said, that is a nice and bright idea. The prioritization aspect just really needs to be cemented. And I think that, quite frankly, puts the ball in the league's court because if you say, no, we're still not going to budge on what you guys want in the CBA, then I could see players just taking their talents elsewhere to get paid, honestly.
Yes, ideally, we will get some more information as the coming days come along. We've already gotten a lot. We'll continue to keep you guys updated. But thank you so much for watching Locked On Women's Basketball.